Welcome to the Engineering and Public Works Roadshow, coming to you from Winston-Salem, North Carolina at the Great Trail State Conference, celebrating the Great Trail State of North Carolina. And we're putting a focus this week on a series of projects that are focused on recreational infrastructure, really bringing people in contact with nature, giving them places to explore, to relax, and to enjoy family time. And it's something that is lost in really the world of roads, bridges, service, and vertical infrastructure. It's really the things that tie communities together. And we're here joined by Gina Strago with Mecklenburg County and Tristan McManus with Dewberry.
Yep.
And we're talking about the Torrence Tributary 2 Greenway project. And this is in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. Tristan, let's start off by talking about the project itself, really its inception and how Dewberry became part of the process. A little background.
Absolutely. So the project really started with the original Mecklenburg County 2008 master plan, where it was a really ambitious master plan to connect the entire county with a network of greenways. Fast forward a couple of years, the recession hit, so all those projects got put on hold for a long time because funding got cut everywhere. And then around 2017, things started to come back to life for this project in particular. And something really unique about this is NCDOT and the county started working together because we had this approved greenway on the master plan that crossed I-77, which right now pretty much bisects the county and Huntersville equally on both sides, right? And NCDOT started in, I want to say it was like 2016, started looking at improvements for a toll lane, adding that to 77. And they started conversations with the county about, well, y'all have a master planned greenway that shows going across. How are we going to do that? So that was the very first start of this. So NCDOT actually incorporated a tunnel under 77 with those toll lane improvements to allow that connection to occur. Then the project kind of sat for a couple of years, and then the county was able to find funding for it, issued a formal RFQ, and that would have been right around 2019, I believe. And we were selected for that, fortunate to be selected for that. Started the design process at that point, and then it's basically from that point until back in June we had the ribbon cutting ceremony. So it's been a long but rewarding process for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Gina, you came into the project as it was ongoing. What does it mean for the county to be able to have this greenway and to have this connection now for communities?
Well, that is really, I think, one of the big messages of what the goals of the master plan and our greenway networks are, is we want to be able to connect all these greenways eventually, because if they're just little sections of trail every so often, it doesn't make as much of an impact. So this trail in particular, we haven't been able to cross under a major highway before and bring the community on the east side of Huntersville over to the west side. And Huntersville does have a really great existing connected network. So this is a huge deal for the community up there, and just, I think, what it means for us being able to make progress on these greenway goals in general. So.
Yeah, that's a really big, I think, thing to point out, is the fact that there are so many networks of existing greenways that if they're not tied together, then you have this big gap. That's really it's have that connection between communities, right? So, and it's giving people who usually might not have that access to recreational activities or the outdoor space, giving them the possibility to get out there and improve their quality of life.
Yeah. I think the county. We do have a lot of greenways all over the county right now that might not necessarily be connected yet, but I think there's a good balance of there being greenways in areas where people, it's spread out enough that no matter where you live, you have access to greenway, even if it's not connected yet. Because if you're just building it in one section and building out from there, everyone over here, it's hard to get to that connection. But now we're starting to get to a point where they're all starting to tie together. So.
One big connected network.
Right.
Well, and I think too, one really great thing we've heard throughout the completion of this project now, we know people who work right in downtown Huntersville. Prior to this project happening, they only had the downtown Greenway, which was about 1.25 miles that they could go for a walk on during lunch. So they'd make multiple passes up and down the Greenway sometimes. Now that they've got this connection through Torrence, it actually takes them through to the existing Torrence Greenway, and now they've got access to easily 15 miles or so, so they can actually go all the way out if they want and come all the way back in. And we've heard they love having that connectivity now.
Yeah. It's one of those things where we talk about needing to get out there and needing to get more active space and activity, and these are the things that will actually allow people to do it, and ease and convenience of use is a big thing too, right? Because one of the big impediments is just not having the ability to be able to walk out your door and have access to 15 plus miles of active greenway.
Right.
Yep.
How does this, Gina, fit into the broader and longer scope for the county?
Well, I think, it for one thing, like we were saying, getting under 77 opens up this whole new world of greenways that we can connect in from there. So, I mean, this trail was a big extension that made, I guess it overcame a big obstacle, getting on the other side of 77.
Yeah.
So.
That was a big obstacle. Were there any other challenges that I'm sure there were, but what comes to mind as challenges in the design phase of actually getting this all taken care of?
There were a few, and I'm sure Gina's going to throw in a few more here, but it's hard to point to any one thing. The really cool thing about this greenway, it's located in a terrain that's really unique in that you don't typically find it out in the Piedmont where we are. You've got rock outcrops and you've got some fairly steep terrain going up to the existing developments. So it almost starts to feel like you're getting into the foothills of western North Carolina at points. So one of the big things is dealing with the big rock outcrops, which it's great. Now we can bring people down there. They can see these massive boulders that have been there for eons, right? But then dealing with wetlands and how do you navigate this very unique environment, especially during construction, without destroying the very thing that you're trying to bring people into contact with. So I mean, from an environmental standpoint, those were the main ones, is rocks, and then you've got extensive wetlands. I know community, I mean, what you and Jen had to engage with some of the other stakeholder groups, that was a whole nother set of challenges.
That's actually really, before we go into that, I was going to mention that a lot of times people who are outside of the industry think, okay, engineers and designers are sitting at tables and computers and doing things. They don't realize how much stakeholder input and how much interaction happens. So on that point, I mean, how did that process work with engaging and enrolling all these groups?
Well, we talked about this the other day, that there was just a extraordinary amount of stakeholders involved with this project, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's good having input from as many different groups as you can, so you're fitting the needs of everybody, but it obviously compounds the amount of time that you need to spend talking to people and getting input and feedback, and not just in the first run where you go through the design, but once we get into construction, if anything comes up that has to change, you're standing there thinking, what are the implications of doing this design change, and who do we need to talk to now? And it's that, I mean, it just complicates it. But it's it's definitely an exercise, and there's the technical side, but there's also the people aspect of it, where you need to be able to communicate at the right time, the right way, make sure that they're getting the feedback that they need afterwards, and making sure they're being heard, because if you're not getting that feedback, then you're going to run into more trouble.
Absolutely.
So it's all part of it, but I think it's a good thing. You're getting a lot more perspectives when you have more stakeholders. So,
Absolutely. One of the things that we look at with the Roadshow, of course, is the future generation of the next generation of people in getting involved, because we have a shortage of engineers, shortage of people getting into this area. From the county's perspective, from I guess more of the owner-operator kind of side, what would you say to people out there who are looking at careers, in this area, in the built environment, let's say, or asset management? what would you say to them as why this would be a good thing to get into? For you, how did you find your way in as a you're a PE, you're a professional engineer. How did you find yourself getting involved?
Yeah, well, I kind of, I wish I wasn't admitting it this way, but I kind of stumbled into Greenways. The first firm that I worked with had a Greenway team, and they just so happened to have a need for extra help. So that's how I got into it. But my background is environmental engineering. That was my degree from Clemson. So I had an interest in the environmental aspect of it before I started my career. But I think anybody can say they like being outside. Like when it's nice weather, when it's the fall or the spring especially, it's great. And I think really during COVID that opened people's eyes to how important it was and how much of a difference it can make in your mood and your mental health and your physical health, like being able to be outside and have access to free exercise too. So, I think it's there's a lot of different routes that you can take to get involved with these kind of projects. And my background was environmental engineering. I came out of school kind of more in a civil path, but my path kind of just led me into trail design. But you don't have to be a civil engineer. I mean, we work with geotechs. If you're involved in more of the construction side, you can get into the construction business, but I lost where I was going with that.
I mean, Tristan, you mentioned the fact that you're a landscape architect with Dewberry.
Yep.
And how did you find your way into the industry? Because you said you didn't even know it was an option.
I mean, honestly, I did not know landscape architecture was a path until it was late in high school, and I was trying to figure out what do I want to go to college to do. And I had to start doing, research and figuring it out because nobody was coming to me and telling me civil engineering or landscape architecture was even an option, right? But I knew I was always really good at math and science, always had an artistic streak, had to have that creative outlet with what I do, right? Love being outdoors, right? What can I do that's going to be fulfilling, lifelong work? And the more I researched it and looked into it, I discovered civil engineering and landscape architecture. Landscape architecture gave me a little bit more of that creative freedom, so I kind of steered down that path and went to the Ohio State University, got my MLA, and moved down to North Carolina.
I'll accept it.
Okay. But moved down here in 2006, got my job with a firm here that specialized in parks, and fell in love with just working on parks and greenways and being part of the public process, and then just being able to help the community realize their needs. And it really is, we're providing one of the most sought after pieces of infrastructure that communities all around the country are clamoring for, which is greenways and trails. I mean, that's usually the number one item on a master plan. We want a greenway or a trail, and then you help bring that to them, and then later on, once the trail's open, I mean, heck, long before it's open, they're out there walking on it.
I mean, we were telling people, this is still a construction site. I know it looks like it's done, and I know you want to use it.
Very eager to get out there.
But it's so satisfying seeing that, though. I mean, anytime I go on the trails, I love going on the greenways. My husband and I like to rollerblade, so we'll go out there, and it's I just love seeing families with kids on bikes, learning how to ride their bike, or people going for walks. And if you are talking to people, if I'm with my husband, he loves to be like, she works on these greenway projects, pointing it out. So it's very, very rewarding, and you just see it every time you go out there. The work that you're doing is making people happy, and they want to use these services that you're providing. So.
Fantastic. Well, it's a great place, I think, to wrap it up. Gina, Tristan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
It's a great example of the marriage between good landscape architecture, good engineering, and a good public infrastructure. But improves communities, exactly the kind of thing that we want to talk about at the great Trail State Conference. So thank you very much for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And again, this has been the Engineering and Public Works Roadshow, coming to you from Winston-Salem, North Carolina at the Great Trail State Conference. We'll see you next time.